Aloha and hello. Welcome to Holy Matrimony. I'm James Fenimore. That's at James Fenimore _
And I'm Trisha Fenimore. That's at Trisha Fenimore. You can also find the show at Holy Matrimony __.
Today we're brought to you by Sex Ed Reclaimed. Have you ever wondered how to talk to your kids about sex but don't quite have the words? Sex Ed Reclaimed has you covered with age-appropriate content made just for your family. Get curriculum that covers all the hard topics from a faith-based worldview. Kristen Miele has educated tens of thousands of students in multiple countries to encourage organic conversations within families about a gift God has created. This education was made for such a time as this, so find your curriculum today at sexedreclaimed.com. All right, today we're talking about a little bit of a landmine. It's the in-laws.
Some might say it's more of an atomic bomb, but...
We'll speak to both of those people. Our atomic bomb group, our landmine group, and of course the third group is, I have lovely in-laws. I don't know what the problem is. And we pray that for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, where do you think we should begin?
I think that we should talk about, first of all, I think we should establish the rightful place of a marriage and of in-laws.
Okay.
So what do you think about that?
So, there's I think our generation has suffered from this a little bit more than previous generations. But the fact is, when you get married, you are now starting your family. Mm-hmm. Not to say you're not still a member of your family.
Right.
Your parents are still your parents. Your brothers and sisters are still those people too. But when you're out with friends or at work and you say, I'm going out with my family tonight, the assumption is your wife and your kids.
Mm-hmm. Or your spouse and your kids.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, for me, so my wife and my kids. If I had another type of spouse, it would be really interesting. It'd be a whole other podcast. Maybe an answer to the internet one day.
Anyway, I think that that's supported through Scripture, frankly, is when it says, like, when you get married, you leave your parents and cleave to your partner now,
yes.
Your spouse. And I think that should be clarified, because it's like when we talk about who our obligation is to primarily in these conversations, it should be primarily to your new family.
Yeah.
And not even to call it the new family, like your primary family, which once you get married is the marriage. Once you bring kids in, it certainly is, it's that.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say that you're not still having these extended family members. You absolutely are.
Without a doubt.
But I think that we just need to make sure that we know, because I think sometimes when I hear things, it can be very hard to do that. When you grow up as a kid with parents, like that's, you listen to your parents and all of this. And not to say that you still don't, but then when you become an adult, you are called to be an adult, and be your own family unit once married.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird transition.
Yes, and it's a learning process for sure. And it probably is lifelong.
And if it's a weird transition, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you have you're close with your parents, you're close with your brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. So, don't take that for granted. Don't be like, oh God, I got to do all this now. And we're certainly not advocating like, oh, sorry, I got my own family now. Can't pick you up from the doctor, Mom.
Right.
Like that's not what we're saying at all.
Right.
So it's important that we clarify that too. They're still part of your family. You still love them. You're still going to help them when it's appropriate.
Right.
You're still going to be there for them when it's appropriate. You're still going to spend holidays with them when it's appropriate. But it's important to just know.
I think that goes into an interesting point where it's like, if your spouse has a problem with your parents, it's not just, well, they're my parents, so it's you have to prioritize that in the relationship, because that is your partner and they are adjusting to their in-laws. And this is really all I have to say on this topic, is you have a lifetime of learning and adjusting and kind of relating to your parents and understanding them. Your spouse is just kind of got thrown in, and now they're and you with their parents as well. And in some cases it's not a big deal, but in other cases it can be, where it's like each of us have had our own life with our parents to learn them and kind of relate to them and all of that. But we need to understand that the other person doesn't have all that practice. And so there's a learning involved with them as well.
I think that's a great...
And with the parents to the spouse, too. It goes both ways.
Yeah. So I think that's a great way to, kind of summarize what we had just said. Like, if your spouse has a problem with your parents, their in-laws, you have a problem. Mm-hmm. And your problem is to make your spouse feel comfortable, not to make them get necessarily in alignment with your parents or get in line with your parents or just say, that's my parents, deal with it. It's not that. That's not what and you might have to have an uncomfortable conversation with your parents too. But your commitment is to your spouse. Mm-hmm. Your second commitment is to your parents.
Yes.
That's the pecking order. I saw a video on social media and it was awful. It made me so sad because it was just people interviewing a bunch of men and saying that had a daughter. And I said, rank them. Your wife, your mom, your daughter. When I tell you I saw 10 videos, the wife must have ranked last in like 7. Yeah.
Wow.
And the premise was, I understood their rationale was, well, she could take care of herself. My mom's already old. My daughter's already young.
Yeah.
But my wife could handle things on her own. But that wasn't the question. That wasn't the question. It was rank them of importance to you.
Yeah.
And I don't have a daughter, but I'm telling you, like, it starts here.
Yeah.
Everything starts here.
Yeah.
Without this, everything else kind of goes to
it just dissipates. Yeah, like it spread. It separates.
I made a commitment to you.
Yeah.
And of course, when we had children, I made a commitment to them. Mm-hmm. And my parents made a commitment to me. Mm-hmm. But I made a commitment to you. And out of all these things, this was a choice.
And by prioritizing the marriage, you are benefiting the children in
100%.
profound ways.
100%.
I think that's a really fascinating way to put it. And that's got to be hard to deal with. I mean, I think, when we talk about this issue with in-laws, there is that level of ranking in a way. And I was listening to a video on the internet the other day where the woman was saying, like, well, these are my parents and I'm just going to, leave him because these are my parents. This is my family. And I think with women, there's a particular, I don't know if it's a gender thing. It sort of seems like it, where it's more of like that women would stay in the home and then get married and then go live it. Whereas men are kind of...
I'm Italian.
You are?
And I can pretty much guarantee you I could probably name on... I need a lot more hands to talk about the men and their mothers.
well, that's what I mean. Is like you're entering into this relationship, but I think if we know where our focus should be right out of the gate, it's going to clear a lot of things up. But here's the other thing: the in-laws and the parents need to also understand that our priority is to our spouse now, and then they are a priority still, but behind the marriage. And if they don't recognize that fact, it's going to be a tremendous stressor on the relationship because you'll have people inserting themselves into a position that they don't rightly hold anymore.
Yeah. And I think part of this too is choosing your battles. If you're a spouse and you have issues with your in-laws,
everyone can choose something.
Pick your battles. Like if it's like she was, she didn't clean up after herself, or he didn't help out with the dishes after I cooked this great big meal. That's annoying. But maybe if there's other bigger, if that's your biggest issue, you want to bring it up. But if there are bigger issues, maybe let that one slide.
I was just joking with you last night about this, where it's like, so Jimmy has a thing where he likes a clear sink at the end of the night.
End of the night.
Well, anyway,
all day,
all the time.
All day. We have a dishwasher for a reason.
But I like to eat ice cream at night, And sometimes I'll put a bowl and a spoon in the sink, and it's not a big deal, but like he'll make a joke about it, and he's like, really? The dishwasher's right there? Really? And I looked at him last night and I was just like, honey, if this is your biggest problem, what a blessed and lucky man you are.
Blessed and lucky man.
And so, but in a way, it helps to contextualize the issues and problems that you're having with your in-laws. Are they issues and problems for real, or are they nuisances, you know?
And I think we should also kind of put a disclaimer at this moment before we get too far down the road. We're not giving people kind of carte blanche to just write off their family in such a way of like, you know, I'm never going to see you for holidays because I just don't want to leave my house. Like, you still do have an obligation to your extended family as long as it's appropriate.
Yeah. As long as nothing egregious has happened. We're not endorsing that whatsoever.
It's like, I'm married now. See you later.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything.
Peace out.
Yeah. Obviously, those instances happen.
Right.
If they happen, there should be a reason. It shouldn't just be, I'm married now and I'm going to deal with this.
You know, I think that how do you deal... I think an extra thing is like, how do you deal with your spouse if they're having problems with your parents? And then how do you deal with your spouse when you have problems with their parents?
Well, first of all, you have to hear each other out. You have to really talk to each other about what the actual problem is. So you could lay it all out there and really start to work on the solution. Now, these problems can range, again, from something as simple as whenever they come over, they don't take their shoes off, to, look, I don't like the way they talk to the kids, or I don't like the way they talk to me, or I don't, you know, these are much bigger problems.
Yeah.
So maintaining the theme of what we've just discussed, this is the priority. So this is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. It can't be met with, deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, but also, it also needs to be understood that if there's pettiness there, that's why we're saying choose your battles. Eventually, your spouse can get a little resentful. Like, you're really making a mountain out of a molehill. I know you don't like my mom or my dad or whoever, or my brother even, my sister, whatever. But, like, they're family. I do want to see them. I do want to see them, you know, on holidays or at this times of year. So it's important to hear the other side, too.
I think the picking of your battles is so important, because if you pick every battle, then when the important battle comes that you really feel passionate about, and it's not just, you know, the bowl in the sink analogy, then it's going to be a little bit like the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, you've had a problem all along. You've had a problem from A to Z, so why should I listen to this one? If you rarely... you know, like if you don't speak up about these little nuisances and you're like, you know what, they're people, whatever, we're going to give some grace. And then you come to your partner with a problem, I guarantee they're going to have ears to hear that, because it's such a rarer occasion.
Yeah.
I think that communication is so important throughout, whether that's with your partner, whether that's the two of you going to a set of parents or in-laws, talking to them, or one-on-one doing that. But I think as long as everyone is open to communicating in a healthy way, things should work out pretty well. When that's not the case, then maybe some boundaries and some other conversations need to be had. But we should at least give everyone the opportunity through communication to sort things out before we resort to things like, well, I'm out, you know? Like we should exhaust every other option.
Yeah, when you have that foot down moment, it needs to be a foot down moment.
Yeah.
It can't be, here we go again.
Yeah.
It's got to be
egregious.
Listen, here's a great example. You know how I feel about the sink.
Yeah.
If I'm not complaining when other people are putting dishes in the sink when the dishwasher's right there, I'm obviously I'm letting an annoyance go.
Right.
And I'm not saying something.
Right.
So even that is like, you recognize, like, I could have been complaining about that. I don't complain about that.
That's true.
You
Recognizing where your partner gives grace and picks those battles is important, and acknowledging too. I know you've done that to me over the year, where you're like, I really appreciate this and that. And that goes a long way.
Yeah. So when I do bring something up, you know it's serious.
Yeah.
I've let things go that have annoyed me. You know, you recognize that. You know that. You know, maybe even you have to say it if you don't think they're recognizing. You could always say, you know, whenever your parents are around, they really could help out and put some stuff in the dishwasher. It's not a big deal. I don't really care. I'm happy they're here.
Yeah.
Let them go enjoy their grandkids, or let them go relax. They've had they're older. And when you show your spouse that, there's grace there. So then when you do come and say, look, here's the situation, so and so is really not speaking to me kindly, and they haven't the last couple of times I've seen them, or they make backhanded remarks,
Yeah.
or it's
Or they've done something with
yeah.
the kids that,
Yeah, well, I think we could get into that as a whole separate issue, because
Yeah.
I think the kids is like, now we were involving other people. This is about us.
Yeah. And that mama bear.
Yeah,
or
yeah, I know, you're
that
ready to rock.
protective. No, I do think that it's important, though, to address it. I mean, we had a situation, and I'll share about this. We had a situation with my parents and our son, and it was just, I had asked for something specific not to happen, and it happened. And when I tried to communicate then, hey, thought we talked about this, I was met with, well, it's not a big deal. You're, this and that. It's not a big deal. And in that moment, I tried to communicate the fact that it's the parents' job to determine what's a big deal for their kids. That's not for anyone else on the planet to decide. If one parent doesn't think it's a big deal to use foul language, you go into other houses and that's a really big deal. That's just an example. But the examples are endless of this kind of subjective definition of what's a big deal. But I think that, that's an example of, when grandkids get involved is when things can get messy. And it's usually when people don't have ears to hear and don't understand the appropriate level of marriage, kids, and then, am I communicating that properly?
I think you're communicating it better than you know, because the words you used were, it's not their place to decide if it's a big deal or not. Well, let's go back 10 minutes ago. That's what we said about dealing with your spouse when one of them has a problem. Tell the other one not to say, it's not a big deal, just let it go. We're telling you not to do that to your spouse, so we're certainly not going to, and we're telling you that this is the primary, so we're certainly not going to allow that
for someone else to tell you what's a big deal with your kid.
Exactly. Or just in general.
Yeah.
Or
That's
just
true.
in general.
That's true.
If it's an issue for you, it's an issue, period. Now, again,
that's a great point.
You want to go back to the boy who cried wolf. If everything's an issue, then you know what?
That's true.
All these things can be an issue for you,
right.
But you're an issue to me.
I was going to say, but maybe now it's their issue. But yeah, that's a great point.
So,
is if you come to somebody in a loving relationship and say, hey, this is a big deal for me, and they try to look at you and say, no, it's not, there's a fundamental problem in that relationship.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Because we have, when we've gotten in arguments, when we've gotten in conversations, whatever it is, it always comes down to, I love you and I want to hear you.
Yeah.
Because I want to know.
I'm ready to cry. Because that's something that's taken me so long to learn. And you've helped me so much. But I really hope people understand that. If it's a big deal for you, somebody who truly loves you and wants what's best for you is not going to shut it down and try to dismiss it away because of how, they don't want to have the conversation or how it makes them feel. They're going to recognize it and they're going to honor that and be with you in that and help you through it. And I wish that for everybody, truly, because it's been so life-changing for me to learn that.
It's important. You have to remember that things that come easy to you don't come easy to other people. So that goes across the board for everything. So things that you don't consider an issue, they may consider a huge issue. And you have to respect that because it's a person you love. Now, I'm not saying you got to deal with that every day on the street or with other people, but when it's a person you love, this should be much easier than we make it out to be. Yeah. Because instead we're just so in our own bubble of experience and how we feel about things that we don't try to see it from someone else's perspective.
Or maybe even it's if you haven't taken the time to heal your own stuff, you don't even know how to address the process of, you know what I mean? And so you just shut it down and put it away because that's how you deal with your stuff. Yeah, I'm just throwing out options.
You're 100% right. But back to the kids issue, if there's an issue that arises with kids or just an issue in general, I think the first step is for the son or daughter or brother or sister, biologically, they need to handle it first.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Whenever there's an issue, whether it's with kids, whether it's with your spouse, whatever it is, the actual son or daughter, brother, sister.
Oh, I see.
Should be handling it. The
Oh yeah, because I got
the in-law, the daughter-in-law, son-in-law, whoever, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, should not be the one to do the confronting.
right. That's going to make a big issue.
I think it should be done by the family.
But there are times where the partner getting involved is appropriate.
Correct.
Like if the family's becoming abusive, if it's getting like a gang up scenario. But like I agree, where the person should try to resolve it with their biological family that they were born into first.
Yeah.
You know, like that, because you can handle the nuance of the
Well, you said in the beginning,
Yeah.
you've had all this life
You have
experience of dealing.
for better or worse, you've had the experience of getting to know your family members in and out.
Yeah.
So you would know how to communicate things.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
But to your point, you are correct that there is a time that your spouse should get involved.
Yeah.
Now, I think when it comes to children, that might happen a little sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. The parents' right and ability to protect their kids or like just do what's right for their kids shall not be infringed, in my opinion.
Fair. You're right. But regardless of the timeline and regardless when, there is appropriate times. I think it's a little hard for us to kind of spell that out with not having a specific example from somebody. So if you do have a question, please email us, DM us, whatever. We don't even need to talk about it on an episode. We can talk about it offline.
Yeah.
But it is important to know that there eventually becomes an appropriate time, but it's good to try the other way first because it's going to be received easier. Now, on the reception side of that, give some grace because
That's a good point.
don't expect your family, your extended family, parents,
In-laws.
Your parents, your brothers and sisters, whoever. When you're having this tough conversation with them, don't expect them to necessarily just turn on the charm.
I hear you. I see you. I will amend and change.
When have we done that to each other? It's like, what did you say?
Always.
Yeah.
We run this podcast. Always.
All right, you got a point. I love you.
Yeah.
You know, it's
There's
never
a little bit of reluctancy. There's
Yeah.
a little bit of defensive because we're human, and that's the human reaction. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah.
Is when you go to them, if there's a little bit of defensiveness, that's human. We can give grace. But if there's always and only defensiveness and there's never a softening and an acknowledgement of your side of things, then that's problematic.
and a much different story, and probably a
whole other episode, probably.
That's a boundaries episode, and we'll get there eventually. But
Yeah.
that's a big topic. It's a big topic I discuss often.
I get a lot of messages.
Yeah, so that's different. But don't expect them to just turn the charm on. You know, you're receiving this for the first time. It might come as a surprise.
Like it could be a generational thing. Back then it was normal, and now it's not as acceptable and appropriate.
And you said it before, house to house, it's just different strokes
Yeah.
for different folks. So
Yeah.
what was appropriate in one house. And by the way, if your parents or your in-laws have multiple children, give them grace too, because each one of those children probably has different boundaries,
That's
and different
true.
rules for their kids.
Yeah.
So now they're juggling in their mind, am I allowed to do this with this one? Can I do this with that one?
Yeah.
So there's
good point.
give them grace as long as they're coming and meeting you eventually. If again, this isn't a big deal, you don't know what you're talking about, you're gonna have to learn to deal with this. If those are the general answers you're getting,
If that's the vibe of the relationship, we'll have more episodes for you.
we'll talk about that.
And pray for them.
But I will tell you, if that is the vibe, this needs to be a united front.
This needs to be very strong. Absolutely. Because it's challenging,
Yeah.
to deal with anyone in those relationships, especially in familial relationships. It comes with a ton of pressure, both externally, socially, and interiorly, if that's a word, within the family.
It is now.
But I think that no matter what, it's so important to keep this strong, keep this open, keep this loving, and to always remember that, we are not each other's enemies.
Yeah.
So, if somebody has a problem with your parents or you have a problem with their parents, don't make it that you guys have a problem with each other, because then that spirit of strife wins. And that's ultimately what's going to take all the relationships down. And so that's my last thought.
I think it's a beautiful place to stop here and get into answering the old internet. What do you say?
The old internet.
Yeah, well,
the dial-up internet?
Internet 3.0.
The internet that would kick you off if too many people were on. Do you remember that?
Or not let you on if too many people were on.
You'd keep trying.
There's people, there's people listening that have no idea what you're
and
talking about, right?
The younger crowd. I'm dating myself here, but
you are.
In any event, there was a time when you had to wait your turn to get on the internet, if you can imagine.
And it was through a phone line, and you paid a lot of money. And then
the computer was through the phone line, but the computer wasn't through the phone like it is nowadays. Now you have a computer on your phone. Back then, the phone was the phone. We're getting into a history lesson.
I just remember
I was told
you want to talk
math.
You want to talk about dealing with parents when the phone bill would come. Forget about it.
Forget about it.
I'm still paying penance on some of those things. All right, answer the internet. Let's get into it.
Let's go.
So Trisha was asked, how can I help my spouse stop drinking? Now, I know this is a topic that actually comes to you in a lot of ways, whether it's DMs, comments, whatever. So I think we should, this is obviously a good topic for you.
I am, by way of fate and God's hand, that is my area of expertise. So for those of you unfamiliar, I've been sober through God's grace one day at a time since 2011. And so I do get a lot, because I reference it on my account, I do get a lot of questions about drinking. And I think that it's important to delineate the two different questions within this question. So the first is, how can I help a spouse stop drinking who doesn't want to stop drinking? And how can I help a spouse stop drinking who wants to stop drinking? Right?
Those are two very different questions.
And your approach is going to be dramatically different for both of them. So that's the first. You need to identify, does your spouse even want to stop drinking? Because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if the spouse does not want to stop drinking, there is precious little that can be done to stop them short of consequences. So here's what I mean by that. You can't make somebody want to stop drinking. Like nobody can get sober for a person. Believe me, if it could be done, family members and spouses all over the world would have done it already. What I would caution anyone in this position is to make sure that their drinking does not become your addiction. So like, people get addicted to alcohol, but then other people get addicted to addicted people, in that there's a codependency, there's a desire to control. Well, if I could just shape this, and if I could just move things out, and it's like, you can't control addiction. Like I said, if it could be done, it would have been done by now. You can't control addiction. If somebody doesn't want to stop drinking, they're not going to want to. What helps people to get to a place where they want to stop drinking tends to be, in my experience of meeting and chatting with tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands at this point, people in recovery, has been consequences. And like cause and effect, like there are effects to the cause. And what I mean by that is, like, if you go to jail for a DUI, you're going to sit there and I'm not going to bail you out. That's a consequence. Like, if you come home drunk and break something, like, I'm going to I'm going to move to an apartment or I'm going to go live with, I'm just saying, like, there needs to be consequence. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And if you're just bailing them out and enabling them, frankly, through some misguided attempt at love, then you really don't understand love. Because love sometimes is allowing somebody the privilege of experiencing the consequences of their own actions. And if that means sitting in a jail cell because they drove drunk, and that's their decision, and that's the responsibility, and that's the outcome, then that's the case. And I think it's tough love if you have somebody who's drinking and not wanting to stop. It's consequences, how you love them best.
So what I'm hearing you say here is, regarding someone that doesn't want to stop, there's very little, the way you love them has to maybe be different than what people are used to doing. Yeah. As far as loving them.
Yeah.
Hugging them, rubbing their back, telling them it's going to be okay. If it hasn't worked in the past, it's not going to work in the future. It's time to try a new tact.
And an addiction is illogical. Like, it's not going to respond to the whole, oh, it's okay. Like, that may work for a day, but then compassion Here's the thing. So this is a bigger conversation, and it like gets me a little bit fiery listening to
Really?
Inaccurate messaging in our culture, in our society. People in recovery for addiction need compassion. People in active addiction need consequences. Compassion and enabling will kill an active addict and an active alcoholic. And it's really serious that we get to that by helping them along and getting them out of their scrapes and keeping them away from the outcomes that they have brought upon themselves, the trouble that their behavior has brought upon themselves. You are preventing them from hitting rock bottom and potentially getting saved. By raising the bottom, we are prolonging the addiction. And when we prolong the addiction, we give the devil a greater chance to take them out with it. I have countless friends who say that the greatest thing that ever happened to them was them going to prison or jail and experiencing the consequences of their own actions. So that's the first thing is, and I'm not saying like, send them to jail. Although if they have illicit substances in your house, but that's a whole other thing. We're talking about drinking. But that's my advice for somebody who doesn't want to stop drinking. They're not going to change unless things around them start changing. And then it's only a matter of time between, okay, if you move out with the kids because they're drunk every night and they're becoming a hazard and they're breaking things and it's becoming completely untenable and unhealthy to have kids around them, maybe it's you moving out with the kids that's going to be their bottom. Maybe it's not. Pray, ask for discernment, ask for guidance. God will show you the way. And we're going to be praying for you in the meantime. And on a lighter note, if you want to help somebody stop drinking who wants to stop drinking, that's amazing. Oh, and no matter the circumstance, there are amazing faith-based recovery groups for loved ones of addiction, like spouses for people struggling with alcoholism. There's a ton of support groups. Just Google it. There's probably some in your area. If not, nowadays, there's often ones on Zoom. And I know I'm prioritizing I know I'm monopolizing the conversation, but I obviously have a lot of thoughts.
Well, just to recap briefly, the main point that you're trying to get across here is that you have to have consequences.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I think that people need to know this is from experience of people you know. This is not some book you read.
No.
This is not some TV show you watched.
This is not theoretical.
This is lived experience for you. You've seen it in action. You've seen what works. You've seen what doesn't work. And you've quite frankly seen what kills.
And I think the theoretical is what's so dangerous with addiction because I see it all the time and I call it the Emily Dickens effect. Or Emily Dickinson, who is the poet who sat in her attic. Okay, so Emily Dickinson, let me enlighten you of this.
Active alcoholics read a lot of Dickinson.
I can relate to the isolation aspect. So what she did was she sat in her attic basically and wrote all this beautiful poetry about what she thought life was like. This is often what I see in mainstream culture about addiction is people who have a lot of education or, think that they know what addiction is actually like without consulting people who've actually gone through the process, who have actually experienced it in real life. I don't have a single friend I can name in recovery who thinks that decriminalizing drugs is a good idea. We can go in theoretical, we can go to high educational Ivy League play. We can have all these intellectual conversations about it. I do not know a single person in recovery who thinks that's a good idea. That's good enough for me. That's good enough information for me. I feel like we're the experts more than, whatever degree you want to throw in front of us where you're Emily Dickinsoning your way through the topic of addiction. But, all right. I'm getting spicy.
Okay. Let's Emily Dickinson our way through the rest of this episode.
So basically, how do you help a spouse who wants to stop drinking is what we need to address quickly.
Yes. So, how do you help a spouse that wants to stop drinking? I think, one, the compassion and the support here, I think, is relevant.
Yes.
Where it's not relevant when they don't. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So that's for one. Two, I hate to say this because I do drink.
Not a problem. Just to clarify.
Well, you haven't tried to send me to jail yet, so I guess it's not a problem.
He can have a drink and just walk away.
You haven't planted illicit
incredible.
substance
I don't even understand it.
Person.
It's like a superpower. Just gonna leave that much in the glass. You're not gonna.
No, I'm not. I don't want a headache.
Very different.
So, and it didn't taste good.
That doesn't matter.
So when it's
You don't understand it at all.
when it's a person that wants to stop and you're supporting them, if you being like I am a drinker, if you're a drinker, it's time to maybe stop.
For a time.
Yeah.
Look, like when we met, I was almost 5 years sober and had, done the work to have a sobriety that was stable where I could go places normal people can go and do things normal people can do. At no point, would he order something if I were struggling, but it's just not a part of my life. I don't feel tempted at all. And so it's like, where if we go out to dinner with another couple and he gets a glass of wine, it's not a,
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, because
but
then
that's 5 years into it. We're talking about
yeah.
somebody that's actively drinking now.
Yeah.
Stop drinking.
Yeah.
Let's not play this game. You're trying to help? Stop drinking. And if
Yeah.
you can't, the two of you have a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Like let's
Stop drinking and take it out of the house.
Let's get down
That's
to the
number
nitty.
one.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty here. If you're really trying to help this person, that's the first thing you have to do.
Yeah.
You cannot be drinking around them. There cannot be alcohol in the house.
Yeah.
That has to stop. You can't go to a barbecue and throw a few back. You can't go out to dinner and order a glass of wine in front of them. Like that's just wrong. If you want to go out with friends, okay, there's maybe a gray area there. But honestly, I would try to avoid that too in the beginning. If you're really trying to help this person.
Yeah.
Okay? So, especially that they're trying to do the work too. Meet them halfway. They're your spouse.
That's a really good point.
You love them. It's not a big deal to not have a drink. And if it is a big deal, we have another conversation to have.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Then
I
it's
think
a
that's
bigger
the
deal.
biggest part of it. And I think you need to set goals and milestones and celebrations.
I think celebration is so important. I've always really respected the fact that Jimmy always throws me like a party on my anniversary. And I think that that's so special and something that's really incredible. But like celebrating that early sobriety is so unbelievably hard that literally like you want to talk about one day at a time. I'm talking like hours at a time deserve to be celebrated. An hour, a 15-minute interval, is cause for celebration. It's a precious, fragile period in a person's life. I would encourage you to encourage your partner to seek out a community of other people in recovery, as that can help. The fact of the matter is we joke about how different we are, where like when he leaves a drink, I'm like, you're like another species. I don't even understand. And my brothers and sisters in recovery will attest to that. Like there are things normal drinkers do where we just look at and we're just like, I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't, you stop drinking because you feel out of control. It's like, we're like, well, yeah, that's the point, and that's not the normal experience. And so it's important to recognize that you're not going to understand somebody struggling with addiction if you've never struggled with addiction, but other people who have struggled with addiction and have found sobriety and recovery can relate to them in a specific way that is useful, I don't know what that just was. It was the Holy Spirit. But finding a faith-based community of recovery is really important and is going to be a boon, because the fact is you can't handhold your partner through their life, and you can be there and root them on, but it's gonna take a village type deal.
So I think,
and it's gonna take a lot of prayer, and I think the more you can encourage them toward that is important too.
I think this is a good place to kind of stop.
Yeah.
I think we have some good action items. One, you have to stop your drinking.
Yeah.
And get it all
For
out
the
of
foreseeable
house.
future until.
For the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Celebrations. This is a coaching technique. We when we have action items, we set milestones and we celebrate them.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah.
If it's a day, if it's a week, if it's a month, if it's whatever it is, set them, write them down, mark them on the calendar. But get ready to throw that calendar out.
I was going to say, don't go too far.
Yeah.
Because then it gets intimidating and it's like, oh, I can't do that.
Let's get to next week. Let's get to next month. Leave it at that. And then once you're there, what's the next goal should we set?
Yeah.
How are you feeling? Because you know what? After a month, they might be like really still white knuckling it and say, can we set the next goal for Friday? And then this way, it's like Friday, when we get to Friday, we're going to have fried chicken because that's your favorite dinner.
I would, on a food topic, I would also encourage you to encourage your spouse to pick up something to do with their hands, like a hobby. Maybe it's rock climbing. Maybe for me, it was cooking in early sobriety. Cooking helped to save my life, frankly. They say that idle hands do the devil's work, and that's true. If you're doing something with your hands, with your body that keeps you focused on that task, then in that moment, you are not thinking about alcohol. And if you are, it's fleeting because, now I need to add this ingredient. And then you like to encourage that. And they may get a little fixated on the new task because we have very eager personalities in a beautiful way. But it's like to encourage them still. Like, so what, they're rock climbing every day. They could be doing worse and have, something like that. I think the cultivation of a hobby in early sobriety cannot be understated or overstated, whatever it is. It's very important to keep your hands busy.
Okay, so to wrap it up, we have the get the booze out of the house, don't be drinking around your spouse, celebrations and milestones is really crucial and really important, and probably the best piece of advice is to find a community, like you said.
Yeah.
So go out there, find a community of people that have been through this, that can help you through it, that understand it. Support your spouse in doing that. Help them do that. That is so huge. Celebrate that.
Yeah.
Right?
There are a lot of communities for both members of this marriage. People struggling with addiction and people struggling with people they love in addiction. Okay. Whether that's Bible groups, whatever. So
yeah, that's
go out
great.
there and look for the community.
So that would be our 2 cents on this matter, and it should help. Anyway, this has been Holy Matrimony. Thanks for tuning in. I'm James Fenimore. That's at James Fenimore _. I'm
Trisha Fenimore. That's at Trisha Fenimore. And you can always find the show at Holy Matrimony __.
You can also find us at thefenimores.com. So take a look. We'll see you next time.